are listening to the Amoda Maa podcast. In this series, Amoda explores her essential teaching through conversation and excerpts from interviews and events. To find out more about events and to sign up for her newsletter, go to www.amodamaa.com. Please subscribe, comment and share if this podcast moves you. And if you feel called to donate, please go to the website. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Greetings once again, and welcome to another Amoda Maa podcast with me, Kavi, and Amoda Maa. Hello, Amoda.
Hello, Kavi.
Okay, so we have decided in our infinite wisdom to tackle, at least from a spiritual perspective, shall we call it, for want of a better term, maybe the non-dual perspective, the tricky subject of trauma. Do we need to heal our trauma before we can awaken? Now, obviously, neither Amoda, this is our addendum, neither Amoda nor I are experts in the professional sense at the tricky subject of trauma. However, many people turn up to our events and our sessions and want to unpack, talk about, deal with, heal, and all of this kind of stuff, their trauma. So we want to talk a bit about the ideas of trauma and how those notions of trauma kind of sit within the field of non-duality from this awakened one, specifically Amoda Maa. I'm going to hopefully try and tease out, unpack, challenge if necessary, all of everything that might be relevant to some of this conversation. It's not going to be extensive by any stretch of the imagination, but hopefully it will stir something within you, which is the main subject, the main matter here. So look, the topic of trauma has become a popular and relevant conversation in today's culture and has seeped into spiritual inquiry. Why is it of relevance to the spiritual seeker? I have 100 other bullet points here that I might refer to as we dive in and explore, but I'm not going to saturate the field with that at the moment. I just simply think we need to get our juices flowing in this improvised conversation, and that's kind of enough to start with. So, Amoda, can I hand that over to you to unpack it a little bit and speak to it?
Perhaps we should start by acknowledging that trauma has become a prevalent and relevant conversation in many areas of society and culture. There's the trauma of that gave rise to the Me Too movement. There's the trauma that is being exposed in Hollywood culture. There's the trauma that is becoming more obvious and more widespread because of war and the need
race trauma,
gender trauma, culture trauma,
ancestral trauma,
handed down through generations. Much of this is becoming more prevalent in various conversations. And that's relevant. Yes, this is just exposing perhaps hidden dynamics, hidden relationships of, well, you can hardly call them relationships, but areas of violence and abuse in many areas of society and the human experience. And it has seeped into spiritual conversation, spiritual inquiry, especially in the quest, if you like, for awakening. So people are asking questions, primarily the one being, do I need to heal my trauma before I can awaken? And it's really the same question ultimately as, do I need to fix my personality before or my personhood before I can awaken? So we're not obviously going to go in the direction of ancestral trauma, racial trauma, and that's not our field of expertise, but we will talk about it from the perspective of awakening. Of course, all of that can be included. So where do we begin with this?
Could we? I think this is. I mean, as you describe it, it's extremely pertinent to where we are at as cultures. Extremely pertinent to where we're at as an evolving, which we are, an evolving species, although sometimes it makes one wonder whether that's true. But all of these conversations are relevant to that because there is a shadow, there's trauma, and it's all coming up to the surface because maybe there's some sort of innate movement on some level to actually deal with it, so that therefore we can move into a new, I don't know, phase of being.
Yes, and the danger, if you like, or the tricky part is, as the question or conversation or fact, reality of trauma is exposed in various different areas of life, at various different sectors of society and culture and family and so on. As it gets exposed, if it is dealt with only from the perspective of the personhood, then nothing fundamentally changes. There may be some reparations, some useful, valuable conversations, and so on, and perhaps some kind of self-empowerment in those situations, or perhaps not. But fundamentally, it doesn't really resolve the issue, because the fact is, if we look at human life over at least thousands of years, could we not say that every aspect of the human experience, not every aspect, but many aspects of the human experience are traumatic? There has been war for forever. There has been violence forever. There has been dysfunction forever.
I would hazard a guess that, the blanket statement, life is traumatic, is a perennial truth that crosses the time gap. Yes.
Yes. And then, so then we can look at what trauma is. So let's not say, let's embrace the possibility that this is not a new occurrence, a modern day or postmodern occurrence, but actually one that is embedded in the human experience.
However, we do have an advanced psychology these days. At least it's is that I don't know whether that's true, but it is. Yeah, we have more access to unpack what these things actually mean. So I'm just going to put that to one side. Yeah, but
yes, so perhaps let's look at what trauma actually is. And again, we're not trauma therapists or counselors or any of that, but we can understand it from our own perspective. And of course, both you and I, Kavi, have experienced trauma in various ways.
I think me so less. So I would say that, or that I personally see the wounding that I've carried, that I had, that I received from, various things that happened in the past, really in retrospect stayed on the level of what I would call wounding. They, so, and I think other people, and you included, have experienced what one would categorize, if you like, if there was a psychotherapist or so, would categorize that as trauma. So it's on some levels, it's very specific kind of thing. And I don't really ever, in all honesty, think that I experienced that level of threat to existence, which is where I start talking about trauma, the perceived or experienced threat. Very dynamic, very real threat to one's existence, whatever that means.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I think that's right. But before we perhaps speak about some of that from a personal perspective, trauma as a neurological response that is not appropriate or relevant to the current situation. For instance, well, I will talk about something personal. For instance, having been personally in a war situation with fighter planes, bombers directly above, very close, and so on. When I was taken out of that situation, I would literally jump or tighten at the sound of a plane flying far overhead in a normal scenario in a Western safe, so seemingly temporarily currently safe environment. That was not appropriate. Or somebody speaking with a loud voice, or a car driving fast, and the sound of it would literally make me jump and tighten. So it's not relevant. It's not appropriate response to now. That's how I see trauma playing itself out. It's a carryover from the past. So it's like a trace that's left in the mental, emotional, and physical field.
Yes, I was going to ask about this.
Yeah, that can be a thought. It can be pre-thought. It can be simply a reaction of the nervous system, ultimately. So it's a kind of tightening. It's a contraction in the field somewhere. The thing is mostly that contraction remains unexamined. And it remains unexamined because there is a unconscious fear of meeting what's underneath or what's inside the contraction. The raw, visceral emotion or energy or felt sense. It's like a contraction into a self attempt to protect the self, a shutting down in some way. And that creates a kind of tightness that gets carried over into various situations, relationships, and so on. Now, there's many modalities that assist in unraveling that contraction, both on a physical level and emotional level, through body-centered work, through psychological counseling, and so on and so on. All of that can be a support. But what I see as one of the primary, let's say, issues of trauma, and one that has a danger of being at the core of some of the trauma conversations today in our current world, is that there's an unexamined identity with the victim. This happened to me and it shouldn't have happened. An unconscious identity with that, which creates a perpetrator-victim dynamic. And if we're looking at it really from the place of awakened consciousness, at some point, if true awakening or true liberation or true peace is desired, is the calling, that victim identity must come undone.
And that means
looking within, or looking beyond the fear of what happened, the injustice of what happened, whatever the constructs are that are around, that wrap themselves around this idea, this belief that something bad happened and I have to fix it. I have to heal it. Because the need to heal it is a self-perpetuating cycle. At some point, the deep acceptance allows us to meet the layers of, let's say, stuck emotion or feeling within what we call trauma, within the contraction, and discover that even when we meet, or even when we're present with the rage or the hurt or the fear, we're still here. We're still here as beingness. And nothing has ever touched that. Nothing has ever touched our essential nature.
You said earlier about there being, I don't know what you said, a place for or modalities of healing, for want of a better term, trauma and wounds. But I also hear you saying that in a way you can jump, which is not the right word. You can embrace what you're talking about, which is beyond the victim identity, and falling into a deeper place of openness, even when you've still got, this is the thing, when you're still carrying trauma or wounding. So the question would be, is a realization of the open nature of consciousness, or the open nature of who we are, what happens to the trauma within that? Does it dissolve? Does it disappear? Does it vanish? Does it go back scuttling into the shadows? Does it?
Well,
Can these two things exist symbiotically?
Well, the thing is, trauma isn't a thing. We make it a thing. We make it an entity that has to be healed or gotten rid of, or it's not something we carry because it's not a thing. It's more a refusal, if you like, to meet or be with or be intimate with the original hurt, the original pain. Because in that intimacy with the original pain, a whole plethora of perhaps emotional energies reveal themselves, ones that we hadn't been in touch with. I mean, I was sexually abused, and for many years, I had no access to anger. I would enter relationships and never, ever express or feel or acknowledge that there was anger in certain situations. That was a trauma that was carried over, where I shut down in the abuse to protect myself and also to protect my father, and not acknowledge the depth of rage. Sorry, what was your original question? Can we carry the two things?
Can they both be carried?
Yeah. So it's not a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I understand.
But it's a psychological or mind-body contraction that creates a suppression of feeling, the ability to feel, the sensitivity to the felt sense in the immediacy of the moment. Yeah. When we awaken or are on the journey of awakening, not only do we come more into the capacity to be present with what is, but we also untangle, or naturally untangles, the many identities of me as a victim, or me as a good person, or me as a non-angry person. Yeah, it starts to come undone. So we have more and more ability to be with what is without identifying with what is. And then what we call trauma, which is like a coalesced or contracted energy, comes undone by itself. For instance, again, I'll just use the example. I used to jump at loud noises. For some time, I thought there was something wrong with me. No, I didn't. Trauma wasn't
it wasn't a buzzword in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't a buzzword,
that's right. It's become very much part of the modern or postmodern culture. Yeah. It wasn't a buzzword then, but I knew that it was something. I was self-conscious. I thought there was something wrong with me. I wasn't perfect enough. I shouldn't jump, and so on. That's just one example, on the surface, there were deeper things going on, like the inability to access deep, raw, primal emotions that had been buried, that needed to come into this field of experience in order to release themselves. But just on the surface, the jumping would make me feel self-conscious, something wrong with me, and occasionally, that would remind me of the war, and so on and so on. After awakening, I seem to remember, this is quite a long time ago, that the jump occasionally still happened.
Yeah, I've seen you jump. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was not concerned. There was no me identity.
Oh, yeah. No, I guess you. Yeah.
Be concerned about it. So that was wrong. There's something wrong with me. There's none of that. So actually, over time, the jump in the nervous system has completely evaporated.
So it wasn't
the fear that was held. Yeah, because I remember I used to hold my shoulders like this.
Yeah.
The fear that was tension here. Yeah, because of I'm about to get killed. They're going to bomb us. Yeah, got to protect myself. Got to be really quiet. That completely has released. Now, that's not through therapy. That's not through, I didn't have to talk about it. I didn't have to therapize it. I didn't have to do body work on it. There was some release of emotions, but it happens.
Yeah, I want to talk about
itself.
that in a minute. Because you have done some body work and release stuff. But I want to talk about, so that's quite an important point to make in a way. Yeah, it wasn't that when you jumped, even though you had your awakening experience, it wasn't the jump, it wasn't the retraction, it wasn't that was the issue. It was actually, on a certain level, the interpretation, the narrative or the thought, let's just call it, around that.
That's
that it
right.
Either takes you back on a thought level to things that happened then, because this system that we've got doesn't know anything about time, hasn't got any concept of time. So in many ways, when the body gets triggered, it's still in the experience. But what you're saying is that you didn't deny that or allow it, in a sense. You just knew it was okay, in effect. And I think that's what we've referred to about it was allowed to come home to something greater than itself. And we do talk about this in our meetings all the time. The need, the desire, the longing for everything that has been, we've strategized all our lives. And then it gets to come home, to fall into the openness that we are. Yeah, am I on the right track?
It comes home to the open awareness, the beingness that we are, the presence. Yeah, it's just here, and then it falls into the emptiness of being. The thing that seems to be an impediment to that is the core identity of being a victim. This I do believe through seeing, and working with people and in myself. This needs to be exposed, to be acknowledged. That when, often there is a denial of that. No, I'm not a victim. But actually, the victim identity is at the foundation of this structure, psychological structure called the ego self. It doesn't have to be a victim of racial abuse or sexual abuse, although that can be part of it. It's simply a victim of life. And the ego self loves it. It loves that victim identity. Oh, bad things are happening to me. This shouldn't be happening. It's at the core of the argument with life.
It is actually on the level that you're talking for, more fundamental than a victim of some things. It's actually, and we've gone down to this in the root, haven't we? That actually life is intrinsically either dangerous or out to get me, or what am I doing here? Sort of innate confusion that actually, I've explored this a lot with people. Like this sort of, yeah.
Yes. And so this needs to be examined. When that's examined, when that's exposed, when that's seen for the dreamscape that it is, an inner landscape, a dream self, a dream state of an idea of me, a concept of me, and life outside of me doing something to me, either giving something to me or taking something away or threatening or punishing or abandoning. When that's seen for what it is, which is like a dream world, it's created from our narratives, from our perceptions. When that's seen, then the root of the victim identity comes undone. We call that awakening. Or there's certainly one dimension of awakening. To me, that's the fundamental dimension of awakening. It's not simply having a non-dual realization or perspective or understanding, although that supports this, but ultimately the psychological structure, concept, dreamscape of the me self, which has a victim at its root, at its core, must come undone.
Okay.
And so then there's no more trauma.
Okay, so I want to ask you just on that front, if the victim self, the me identity, the poor thing or whatever, however it manifests, comes undone, what's left?
What's left? What's left is a deep intimacy with what is without an argument with what is. So then everything can be met, past, present, future, it's all in the now. Whether it's a past memory, whether it's a direct experience now, a felt sense in response to something, it's all experience now, deeply intimate, but none of it is actually a problem to the self. It's not something that is punishing me. It's not something that's taking something away from me. It's not something that is adding to me. What's left is open awareness. What's left is the emptiness of self that is also full of life. The fullness of life is one with that. So there's nothing more to fear. There's nothing more to deny. There's nothing more to avoid.
Do you really think that people, and I'm going to go from the first point to the second point, do you really think that people have the capacity to surrender the victim self, or the self, let's call it this for the moment, the tight self that has been trained to be such over such a long period of time, with all of its brokenness and all of its wounds or trauma or etc., takes a great deal of something of grace or or a willingness to actually open enough for that to happen? Is there anything that can be done to facilitate that, or to foster? The apple tree that grows, that releases its ripe fruit, oftentimes has actually been watered diligently by the gardener.
Well, of course, it depends on the individual and if you like, state of consciousness or frequency of consciousness. For many, there is no possibility, well, there is a possibility. There's no desire from within to go deeper than any identity, whether it's the victim identity or anything else. And so we're not addressing that level.
No, no.
Yeah. But for the seeker of truth, or for the seeker of liberation, or for the seeker of awakening, or for the seeker of true peace and true fulfillment, for the one who's willing to go to the essence of things, the essential nature of things, to see beyond the rise and fall of the phenomenal world, for the one who's reached a tipping point of personal suffering and starts to get a glimpse that the many narratives that uphold this sense of me are, in fact, the prison walls that one is seeking to be liberated from, then yes, then there's some possibility to go deeper than the victim identity. It's called self-inquiry. Yeah. To go to the source, to go within to the source of experience, which is awareness itself, that which is prior to the arising of any experience, to meet life fully intimate with what is, no bypassing, no denial, no spiritualizing, but to be fully intimate with what is, without the argument with what is, without the this shouldn't be happening, without the this shouldn't be happening to me, without the interpretation of what is happening.
That's what exactly.
Yeah, because it's from that interpretation that identity arises. This is bad, this is good, this is welcome, this is unwelcome, this is spiritual, this is unspiritual. I deserve this, I don't deserve this. We're split, we're divided. It's the unconscious state. To go beyond that, to the source of all things, which is awareness itself, open awareness, that which is always here, the space within which I experience everything, this body, this sensation, this feeling, this emotion, this thought. But I am not that. I am not that thought. I am not limited to that thought. I am not limited to that feeling. I am not limited to that sensation. I am not limited to this mind or to this body. Because this mind and this body that I experience, I experienced a mind that can form words and concepts and constructs and perceptions. And I experience this body that feels, that touches, that smells, that hears, that sees. But all of that that's taking place is secondary, if you like, overlaid on the field of open awareness that is infinite, unlimited, and is always here. Always here. We can call it space. We can call it sky. Yes, it's coming to know sky nature within which all clouds appear. There's no bypassing of the clouds. There's no rejection of the clouds. There's no grasping of the clouds.
You see, the thing is, what I experience, you was talking about, and I experience for myself now, all these years down the line, is a kind of, when you're speaking in this way and when you're describing this, I experience it as being, I'm actually inside what you're talking about. I'm within the openness. Yeah, there's not ending. It's not confined. It's not a bowl. It is the openness. And I know within myself, even though I said I haven't got any trauma, there was a lot of wounding, and there was actually a lot carried in the nervous system. And so what I'm getting to is that now, after all this time, and there is no heat in this nervous system anymore, it's all gone. It's all vanished. There's more of a grace and equanimity in this experience. It's a totally different totally 100% different experience from me on the other side when I was in the contracted state. And actually, I would say now that I felt, without even realizing it, completely locked out of the openness that you're talking about.
That's right. That's right.
Completely locked out of the gates of heaven.
Yes.
If you like, yeah, because this is a heavenly, without being ridiculous about it, this is actually peace. I feel peace for the first time, yeah, and I was locked out of that peace. So you could have spoken. I went to a lot of satsangs, or some in those days, and what I experienced was that teachers like you, or some of the more divine ones, were speaking utter gobbledygook to me. Not just because of them, but because I couldn't hear it through the trauma through the wounding, through the tightness, through the locked outness. This is a very real thing, because we meet so many people and there's such a lot of willingness. And yet still they're sort of feeling locked out of this experience that you're talking about. And it's heartbreaking on a certain level.
But the more we give our attention, soft attention to this field, an infinite field of openness, this that is always here as that, then actually it becomes natural. It's like we come back and back and back and in to the source, which is where peace is. It's a peace that passeth all understanding. What does that phrase mean? It means it's actually got nothing to do with the circumstances.
Yes.
It's a peace that goes beyond the logic of the mental understanding. Well, this terrible thing is happening, and yet there is this. It's not that something bad may happen. We need to protect ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to say no, or we need to run away, or we need to fight back. Whatever is appropriate in the situation. But when it doesn't come from this tight contraction, it has a very different quality to it.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Something happens, a challenge. Let's take it a little more less of a kind of life-threatening situation, but many throughout the day, many things take place. We get an email we don't like. We find out our bank account hasn't got the funds that we thought it had. Our landlord tells us we need to move. Whatever it might be, many things. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
No, but it did happen.
It did happen, yes. I don't know, our beloved dog, cat is taken sick, or whatever it might be. So many challenges happen throughout the day, or we don't get what we want, or we don't get where we want to go, or something doesn't happen, or somebody rejects us, or whatever it might be. We can meet all of that, the phenomenal display of life that appears to give us something, take something away, and so on, always rising and falling, always giving birth to itself and dying. It's always appearing and then disappearing. Nothing is ever static. We can meet that from this open field of awareness. And then it's not so threatening. It's not so it's not threatening. It's not punishing. It's simply something that needs to be dealt with. Yeah? But it's dealt not from a place of identifying as the victim of it. Yeah? So this brings an inner spaciousness, peace that passeth all understanding, an inner kingdom, an inner sanctuary that is our true home. So wherever we are and whatever's happening, we're at home. We're at home in the I amness, in the bare fact of our beingness. rather than rising up to the surface of the many narratives that create an identity, that create this push and pull of craving and aversion, rejection, resistance, grasping, which is where the suffering is. Yeah.
In that, so I hear you kind of saying that it can all come in. Come home. And that's, I go back in a way to the value of these two qualities of presence and openness, because, and this is a difficult one, I don't mean presence and openness on the meditation cushion, although that might be a good practice, but actually presence and openness in the field of everyday life through the nature of our interactions with ourselves, our partner, our family, etc., and the world is like with that. It's the losing of that, and if we can get to open deeper to the place of presence and openness, then without being facile about it, where's the past?
That's right.
Where's the future? Where is it? And that's that is one of the things that I actually like about non-duality, but not the harsh non-duality, the wet non-duality that we actually, surf in. Because it's true, if you're here and this, it's not, it doesn't perfect the past, but the past is no longer here. Where is it?
Yes. The doorway to liberation is now.
And then if the past comes up,
yes, the past memory may come up, but that memory is coming up now.
The plane goes over. Suddenly I'm pulled out of this nowness. It's okay.
Well, you're not pulled out of the nowness, are you? Because even the memory of something occurs now. And there is no past. It occurs now.
I suppose one of the things that I would ask about, relaxation.
Yes, it's a deep relaxation into now.
Because that relaxing lets the nervous system off the hook.
Because
right?
One of the things of trauma and the identifying with that trauma as a traumatized self is I can't let go of this. I can't relax. I can't feel safe. In other words, I won't. It's a refusal to relax into the now. Because the fear is that I will be annihilated.
So we come back. We've done this before.
If I let go and soften and let it be as it is with all the feelings and the memories and the whatever, I will die. Because that's what you thought or experienced then. If I don't contract and tighten against this threat, yes, that's what I did. When I was sexually abused, I tightened. If I had just, then I would have been abused. I tightened, and in that tightening, I fought back. But I remained in that tightening. So it's an old, yes, it was appropriate then, but it's not appropriate now. Yeah. And so now the I can't and the won't must be exposed, and in the clarity or fire of truth be examined as a false belief, or a belief, let's not even call it false, a belief that you are not willing to surrender into the now. In surrendering the I can't and the I won't, yes, you are right. You will be annihilated. You will die. But it's not you as a mind-body system that will die, because right now there is no threat. What will die is the ego identity that is created or woven out of the I can't and I won't, the victim, the refusal, the tightness, contraction against life now. It dies. That's called awakening.
But the yes, and you know, one of the words that comes up is terror. You know, as you're talking about that, because in what returns in the I won't, I can't, as an adult who's even 40 years down the line, is the terror, and that terror that I think gets confused is not actually the terror of now, it's the terror of then. Yeah, the terror of having to contract so much for one's self-preservation that is carried all these years forward, because remember, the nervous system doesn't have any memory in that, any time factor. It's always now. So the terror that's being experienced that you're talking about, the existential almost terror, it's both things, isn't it? It's a life terror.
Well, there seems to be two terrors. One is the terror from the past because you needed to survive as a functional organism. And the other one is more of the ego's terror of being annihilated in the moment.
They're like this.
That's
they're
right.
like this, aren't they?
Now, you can't go back and change what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
One's response in those situations is right. One needs to tighten or harden against
That's
a threat
right, exactly.
to functionally survive. But it's not appropriate now.
Yeah.
And now what dies is the ego structure, not the mind-body structure. And the two have become confused.
Oh, so let's go.
Because we identify with mind and we identify with body.
Oh. So let's, I just want you to talk about this a little bit more. Whatever you said.
You know, I can't go over things.
No, it's too traumatic.
I don't have any memory of it. I think we're alluding to the two terrors that are actually enmeshed in each other. One is the terror of what happened at the time and the need to protect oneself on a functional level, the organism. So there's a tightening or a hardening to protect the physical body, the mind-body system. And then there's that terror, which is really a terror of the ego dying in this moment as it surrenders into this moment, where all identity is surrendered, where there's a deep softening and relaxing, really a death into this moment, into the now, not trying to uphold anything, not trying to defend or argue or resist anything now, this moment, just the simplicity of this moment. And those two terrors get tangled up. One's an existential terror on a functional level, the functioning of the organism, and the other one is an existential terror on the level of identity.
Mm-hmm. Yes. One's primal and one's, like as you say, spiritual or existential.
Yeah.
But there is a meeting place. Yeah, because they end up dancing around each other. They're not separate necessarily.
No, because, and that's the point where we sort of, you asked me the question, because we identify with the mind and with the body. So when we are trying to protect the mind and the body, because we're identified with the mind and body, we think that's all we are. That's what we are. Then when it comes to an existential, an existential invitation to die as the identity that you are, one unconsciously, subconsciously, or even consciously thinks that this mind and this body are going to die.
Right.
So when we say in awakening, the self died or the me self died, well, obviously this mind and body didn't die, but in that moment, it actually feels it feels as if you're going to disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And if I disappear, that means all of this is going to disappear. I won't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is that this appearance doesn't disappear, but this identity that is attached to this appearance and the appearance of my thoughts and feelings and everything disappears. The attachment to it disappears. The identity derived from it disappears. But this physiological functioning, intelligent organism called mind and body, is still here. That continues to function without the identity derived from it. That is a great liberation. That's why we can say the self is no longer here. The self-identity is no longer here. And yet this organism is still functioning. It's functioning within the field of open awareness, which is the source of I am.
And then if there's any movement, still residual movement of the self, then that's okay as well.
You mean the identity?
Yeah, I mean, because, things aren't they're not black and white. I know what you're saying. There's been a core revelation.
Yes, of course. I mean, various remnants of identity. Yeah, remnants of identity may remain, but then the
relationship to them is different. Yeah,
the light, the luminosity of your fundamental, essential nature as open awareness.
Yeah.
Sees or cuts through beyond that. They may arise, but you're not sticking to it. You're not.
I agree.
Clinging to it.
Sorry, I just got excited by the realization that it gets to be held lightly. The human experience gets to be held lightly because it's not necessarily the full measure of who we are.
That's right. Your what should we call it? Your vehicle, your psycho-physical template that you're sort of born into may continue to operate in various ways, but there's a lightness. You're not deriving your identity to it, from it. You're not clinging to it. You're not trying to push it away or fix it. It just kind of takes its own course, like a river. Yeah, sometimes it flows this way. Sometimes it's always changing. There might be a bend here or a whirlpool here or still calmness here, and it just flows. But you are not that. You are not that. You're not concerned with that. It's simply flowing. You are the water itself. You are the essential nature is water. Yeah. Even that is just a name. It's a label. We can go to its essence, which is unnameable. And that's what we are. So you're not concerned. But when we're, if you like, in the prison walls of identity, then you are that. Yes, you are that turbulence. And oh my God, that's a really bad thing. I have to fix it and change it. Or you are that calmness. Oh, that's nice. Yes, that's who I am. Yeah, and so on. And then it's forever changing. It's forever flowing. But you are not that.
The traumatized wave syndrome, in many ways, is difficult. Yeah, I remember for myself over the last 20 years, really, with you, that the calling, because it didn't, what happened to you didn't happen to me, and it was much more gradual erosion, as we've talked about. And even coming to America, there were like, wow, I'd find myself back into Kaviness, and And it was painful, especially in the contrast to a deeper openness. But that brought me, it brought me face to face with actually having to bear that. And actually, the thing that I learned was what I said about lightness, is to hold the Kavi experience lightly and the past Kavi experience. Our search for perfection is a hidden, trickster within. Yeah, we think we have to sort it all out, get the trauma sorted out, and package it all up, and then we can become somehow some idea of a sort of perfect, and it doesn't work like that. And the whole essence of what you're talking about is holding their human experience lightly without having any identity in it whatsoever. And then it can be allowed to be the wave, but it hasn't got the label trauma on it. It's just got a wave of intense energy.
Yeah, it's just a wave. So, of course, just perhaps to wrap this up and put it into context, it's a very individual journey.
Yes,
there are those people who it is valuable to have trauma therapy, to uncover, to have body-centered therapy, whatever these wonderful modalities are.
For sure.
To feel, to access again the feeling in the moment. So this is supportive to understand, perhaps to put into context. And then at some point, there are those individuals who come to the deeper inquiry. But the deeper inquiry includes this conversation, because whilst we're saying, and what I'm saying from direct experience, that awakening ultimately is the end of the victim identity. It's the end of any identity. It's the end of believing that I am the river flowing this way or that way. It's not about bypassing. Because there can be awakenings. And in that, there can be such a sense of openness and peace and okayness and all of that, joy, that then when there's still an unraveling or movement, the trace, if you like, that continues, that can be pushed away again. So it's all of it, until finally, more and more, deeper and deeper, there is the soft and deep and wide and unending, just being here with what is. Neither clinging to what is, neither creating a position or a landing place from what is. What is constantly unfolding, always in awareness. There is an I that is aware of what is. It cannot be any other way.
I think, that's a very, very beautifully said. And we talked about the grit and the grace of the human experience in the way that you're talking to, and hopefully we've at least touched some of that here. There is grit in the human experience. It is messy and it can be difficult. So, there's always a compassionate view, nod to that, because some people's trauma is worse than other people's trauma, and it can be very insidious and very tenacious, and that's a difficult thing, of course. And but it is also the grit and grace of being human. And if these conversations don't unravel and get to be explored, then they get ignored and they get pushed under the carpet, or they get bypassed, or they get overindulged. And so what we're trying to do in a way is cut a dash between all of those things. An honest, I hope, an honest inquiry. Kind of makes me feel like we might end up having to do a second episode at some point, but I'll, just
no, that's traumatic.
Excuse me, Amoda. Sorry, it's just that's our terrible sense of humor emerging there. You never know. It depends. Yeah, it is a juicy subject for people on the path because they want to talk about it these days and get clear and get as clear as possible and be allowed as much as possible without total indulgence. The grit and the grace of being human. Amoda, anything else to say? I thank you again for your blessing and your wisdom, and it's good to get in there and see, see what's behind the what's behind the teaching as well. So,
all right.
Anything else to say?
No, I think that's all for now.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Please subscribe, join us. Yeah, sign up to YouTube if you haven't signed up to YouTube. Join us on the Spotify or the iTunes, wherever it is that you see or hear us. And we'll be back, hopefully, for another episode in the not too distant future. Amoda?
That's it from me. Thank you. See you in the kitchen.
Thank you. Dear me. So I'll see you in the kitchen, and then the little peyote will be there as well. We'll all have something. Okay. Blessings, everyone. Thank you very much. Goodbye.